Well, Dorothy is here and I'm going to get her now. Can't wait to catch up with her and see what she's been up to. And first time that we do one of our stories here at the new space in White City. Dorothy's here.
Hi. Good to see you.
Good to see you. How have you been?
I'm good.
Yes.
This is bananas.
It is, and this is only 1/3 of the space that we're managing. So this is about 12,000 square feet of labs, and we have about 2.5 million pounds of equipment. And a lot of the work is based on trying to help scientists understand that there are other stakeholders outside of research.
There are.
Outside of the lab.
There are. Turns out. Yeah.
And that those stakeholders are better met and interacted with at the beginning of the journey, even when you're still in the lab.
Oh, yeah.
Or even before you start commercializing.
Yeah.
So that you are aware of the full spectrum of things that you need to take care of. And you, of course, are a front-facing person for perhaps more big tech or the large companies. But as we know very well, there is an opportunity for new founders, first-time founders, to be aware of your work. But before we get into that, you're at DeepMind right now?
I am, yes.
Head of Public Engagement and Policy?
Yeah.
You shifted to a new title recently, which is Policy Lab.
Oh, no, it's Public Engagement Labs.
Public Engagement Labs,
yeah. And the idea is that, so I moved, I'll be totally honest, I left policy partly because, I think it's important to be able to do work that's aligned with your values. And so I moved roles into one that's actually broader, and there's so many stakeholders outside government that are really important. And so my focus right now is on AI in science broadly, as well as in education, and then also in sports. So
I see. So lab stands for anything that is more dynamic than institutional? Or?
Yeah, lab stands for anything that we're doing in terms of a lot of what my team does is we run pilot programs, creative programs to see how we can engage people in different ways outside of just one-to-one meetings or a panel or something very standard and corporate. And we try to create different modes of engagement. So recently we ran a project called Science 2030, which is actually an interactive game that different people can play as they can. Basically, a little bit like Model UN. You're representing a government. You have to make a series of decisions. We will provide some inputs about where we think AI in science is going to head. And there's different events, and you take different turns, and you can decide as a group how you will manage the thing that's coming at you. So it's just a novel and different way of engaging people in the conversation about AI for science that's not you listening to a lecture.
and this would be scientists taking part of the 2030?
Yep, scientists have taken part of it in it. It's also to mix those scientists who have expert knowledge up with people who have expert knowledge in other domains. Like we have policymakers who've joined, we've had civil society groups who have joined, we have other companies who have joined. And part of it is for people to learn, frankly, how to have a little more understanding and shared context and empathy for each other's challenges and roles, as well as learn how to make decisions together. And I think there are very few forums now for collective decision making. We're incredibly siloed, and we think it's enough just to be experts in our own area and not really reach out to understand what somebody else might be going through in their context, when actually a lot of the biggest decisions around globally relevant events and science in particular benefit from lots of multidisciplinary and also interdisciplinary understanding. I think a lot of the breakthroughs that we're probably going to see in the future will be requiring teams to have multiple different levels of expertise that all work together and one of the things that I think we've underinvested in is people who can be that glue between different disciplines.
Which is part of the reason how we connected originally, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
we come from, if you like, the micro stage of innovation and
Yes.
micro stakeholders.
Yeah.
And you're in a totally different world. You know, you've got
Yeah.
thousands of colleagues and teams all over
Yes.
the world and
Yeah.
huge budgets. But yet the relevancy of being able to be holistic in how you think about innovation and,
Yes.
and connecting those dots is perhaps the language that first got us to speak and then work together, and maybe we can share a little bit about those aspects.
Yeah.
I'm curious, the 2030, just
Yeah.
by way of example.
For sure.
So that is almost like a gamified way of understanding the role of AI in the future. That basically means that you have provided the game with context around what the future would look like.
Yes.
Does that come from the human, or does that come from DeepMind?
Right now, it's actually quite manual. Right now,
Yeah.
it's we've worked with a team called Technology Strategy Roleplay out of Cambridge to design the game and the turns and make sure that it is realistic,
Yeah.
and B, based on the developments and the latest breakthroughs and capabilities we're seeing.
So it's social scientists and developers that have
It's social
designed-
scientists, it's people who've developed, I would say that gaming and strategy roleplay has been very constant in, for example, military context for a very long time, right? But it's because they're trying to simulate and understand what future decisions will result in which consequences. And so I think it's helpful for people from different expertise and backgrounds to come together to say, okay, if I'm looking at that potential development and I think this is going to be the outcome in my domain, what do you think is going to be the outcome in your domain, and how those things interact with each other? So yeah.
It's I experienced that from a practical perspective. I never thought of it as something that is actually a discipline in effect, right?
Yeah, I think it is a discipline to be able to. I mean, so much of my roles throughout my nearly 20-year career has been bridging gaps. I mean, scientists, I think, typically think about, oh, I'm trying to get to the right answer. I'm trying to deduce down to the right answer, and that is the goal. But if you look at politics and society and what leaders in government have to think about, it's actually how we live together. Those are very different questions and different types of questions, but they have to somehow come together at some point. And so a lot of my role has been translating this world of just optimize and get it right, and come up with the proof points for why my methodology got here to, okay, what does that mean for how we live together? And I think that the best things come when you can have some sort of synergy there.
We had a few use cases that we looked at together, early stage companies that pre-incorporation, and of course the technology has great promise because it could change materially how the body works or how the world around us works. I think in the fertility space we looked at a few companies together, and even nuclear fusion.
Yes.
And those are great use cases of teams that have great capacity to think about what product to build to solve the specific problem.
Yes.
But not necessarily investing as much time in understanding where the problem may be long term.
Or for the overall, how do you make people comfortable or trust what you're building in science?
Right.
How do you introduce something new? And I think the global context is a really tough one, right? I mean, if you look at the original Apollo projects for NASA and that context, when everybody was optimistic about the future and really that was a shared project for society, how do we reach the moon, that kind of thing. I would say that we haven't built as much of that collective excitement and consciousness and trust in that the next frontier will be a good thing. I mean, if you look at politicians today, a lot of the rhetoric is very regressive, backwards looking, not excitement about the future. And it has to do also with where we are in society today. Most, I think there are a lot of surveys in developed countries where parents are all saying they're scared that their kids will be worse off than they are. So it's really hard to detach the future from that fear. And so there's a harder task in managing that than when everybody's generally optimistic. So I think it is important for scientists to understand that that is the landscape they're walking into, but that there are ways to exhibit great leadership and bring people along for the journey, and the journey that you're on as well. So an example of how it can go wrong, I suppose, is Monsanto, when they introduced genetically modified organisms, and there was a whole protest around, like, I think, killer tomatoes or something. And it set back that line of work in food security for about a decade. And so...
Just because it created a narrative.
Yeah, it created a public narrative that was very resistant to this development. And so I think that's an example of, if you get it wrong, that's the consequence. And the consequence is both for science and society, which is unfortunate. And so how can we, instead of going down that path, bring people along for the journey that you're on, and then create some public and collective support to be doing this type of work?
Is there a thin line between doing education and creating support groups and doing lobbying and being a bit more advocacy oriented, or it's all part of a blur? That
it's, if you look at it as a job, it's a lot of things combined, right? But I think that the reason it's easier to do for science is you have a commitment to scientific integrity and the facts, while also matching that up with the ability to think through what is, and wrestle with questions that society will bring up about, is this something we really want? I think scientists tend to, in my experience, the work they do is so personal to them that sometimes when people start asking you questions that you're not comfortable with, the interaction is quite defensive. And that makes sense. I mean, I think that the path dependency for a scientist getting to their PhD and their defense is incredibly...
it's adversarial.
Yeah,
almost,
exactly,
right?
adversarial. Whereas I don't think every interaction has to be like that. And I also think it's very fair for somebody who doesn't understand what you're talking about to ask very legitimate questions about, is this something I want? And wrestle with that. That is actually, like, collective curiosity is good for us. We want society to be more curious. That is good for science. And so encouraging that mutual curiosity is quite important, instead of being like, well, why didn't you know that?
The expectation of being right in academia is much higher, right? So
totally.
you're peer reviewed and you must be right, otherwise your personal brand equity will be probably harmed from exploring something that is, perhaps a courageous idea, and you have some validation on your assumptions, but you don't have total certainty, and so it kind of slows down the process of sharing and interaction.
But the whole process of science is basically collective uncertainty, right? I think that one of the regrets I used to have around, I was like, oh, I should have studied biology more when I was in school and all this stuff. And my dad actually, my parents are both in drug discovery. My dad actually said, well, it kind of doesn't matter because it's all changed now. And I think if we could just be all more honest about the fact that we're still all learning, everything keeps changing. I think part of the public trust frustration with COVID is that people were presenting all this information, governments were presenting all this information and trying to be very sure about it, when the reality was we all knew nothing. And so I do think this practice of science actually is the constant discovery of new knowledge, and new facts might change how you feel about something. That is the reality we live in. And so I want to see science more as a collective societal project, rather than like proving people right or wrong.
Which requires a change of mindset overall, how academia works and how publications work and discovery and all of that. In a way, AI is coming in to provide faster, perhaps not peer-reviewed outcomes.
No, but
at this stage, but
looking across all the work you've done and all the existing literature, and maybe coming up with some alternative hypotheses that you can test, right? So I see it. We have a product called Co-Scientists that's currently being tested with a number of different academic and commercial researchers, and what we're trying to understand is can AI function as a somebody you can like spar with in the lab?
Yeah. Which in a company, maybe you find in your co-founder or in your early angel investor, in your advisors. But if you're in academia and if you're a PI, you're pretty much a one-man band against or within an isolating system. If you are within a lab, most likely you are following the inspiration of whoever is above you. And you don't have the resources to try it out in your living room.
Sure.
Which is part of the reason of how we also thought about, let's set up labs that are almost like a pay-to-play mechanism for individuals to come in and say, I want access to a bench for 3 months just to test out my idea outside of my academic environment, and then decide whether to go down the path of publication and apply for grants and then go down the academic route, or just pursue the private route. And in a way, we find ourselves almost offering a different avenue for those scientists that are not the traditional mindset. And we can see that we can unlock more and more over time because culture is contagious, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So how's the and that connects me to we opened so many doors, and one of the doors that we opened earlier on was the ability to be able to manage conversations and the difference between education and advocacy and then lobbying. And in a way, one example that and we're both part of this story is Proxima Fusion and the way that we started the company. At least I remember how much importance we gave to making sure that we were able to provide a narrative that was embracing, so it was not just centered around the company, but about the potential of the sector, and creating almost like preempting the push that historically that had been for anything nuclear.
Yes.
And that has allowed the company to, in effect, be able to accelerate a lot of the conversations.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
I think Francesco and his team have done an amazing job. I mean, they're very open to these conversations. And also, I mean, it's, again, thinking about the average person's context. And I think I've dealt with this a lot because when I grew up, I would say, career-wise, I was raised in Washington, D.C. So that's where I had my first few jobs. Yeah. And what you come to understand when you're in that city is your whole existence is about understanding the public pulse. What's the general public's thinking? Where are they at? What's happening? And what do they care about? Whether that's heating their homes in winter, or how they're going to pay for gas in their cars. And it's a really grounding way to start your career, because if you're eventually going to go into these more elite areas where you're constantly working with people with multiple degrees and everything else like that, I do think if you start out that way, then you are almost constantly attuned to, okay, but what is the average person feeling and thinking right now? And so for me, when it comes to nuclear, if you look at what the average person probably knows about nuclear, who hasn't studied physics since grade school, they're probably thinking Chernobyl, right? That's their only reference point. And that's also a problem with, frankly, like, I think pop culture, which is that's the only way they represent nuclear, is like the end of World War II and Chernobyl. There's a lot of other stuff there. That said, I think the narrative around fusion has become so different. And I think it's credit to people like Francesco who are willing to explain, frankly, the difference between fission and fusion, which is to a physicist hugely basic, but to everybody else who hasn't looked at this in a long time, like if you're day-to-day just thinking about the safety of your kids and your family, it's a really hard thing to understand for sure.
That practice is something that we try to bring also to, I remember, to the fertility companies that we've been looking at.
Yes.
So I was picking up on the experience that we have been building within fertility.
Yes.
And especially helping founders at the beginning of the journey. And mentioned a couple of the founders that we worked with, so Jordan and Leah, and of course Alex and Kevin. So this is Euploid and Siklana, and how much stress we put from the beginning in them trying to understand the wider angle and the wider picture of the space that we're in. And rather than getting started almost like zoomed in just on the science or having conversations about commercial partnership, is also leveraging the fact that, hey, this space is new, or not, or has been around. For example, IVF has been around for a while, but has not been innovated at all. And we have an opportunity here at refreshing what the narrative is in the public. And so I was just curious to pick your thoughts over what steps a scientist who is determined to become a founder could do before funding, before getting stuck into delivery of technology and recruitment, but really just what kind of processes could he be or she be exercising in order to form almost like a publicly minded practice for the company, so that
I mean I think questions like this affect who you end up wanting to recruit to build your company, right? Because I think culture is generally created by the people, and so if you're recruiting people who at the outset who are setting the culture, who really are not attuned to how the public might react in response to these developments, then that's going to be a very different company from one that is understanding just social dynamics that might be crucial to how your company might fare in fundraising even. So the example I always give is we did a survey with one of the major investment firms in London, which surveyed thousands of women about, does your contraception work? Yes. Do you still experience discomfort month to month? Yes. Can you rank your household expenses above and below? How much you would pay for this to change? And overwhelmingly, women, even though they control most household budgets and are making more money than they've ever made in the history of time, are still paying for everybody else's health and comfort before they pay for their own. And so what that ends up telling you is that this question around women's health is just as much of a social question as it is a scientific question. And how is that going to either hinder or help your fundraise? How is that going to hinder or help your company as it develops over time? Having a realistic understanding of that is going to help you with recruiting. It's going to help you with fundraising. It's going to help you with how you end up, publicizing, because that is basically the lay of the land that you're dealing with. It's the environment that you're launching the company into. So it's not to say that these things should make you more nervous. It's just, this is just the reality of it. And instead of, I would love to get upset about that fact. It's obviously awful that we're so behind on women's health, and it's hard to form a market, and it's women are suppressing their own needs and wants, but this is the reality that we're in, and so how do we change that?
It's building an awareness about what is the experience from an individual perspective rather than from a thing perspective.
It's the ground truth, right? The ground truth of where we are at in society and the necessary obstacles that are going to come your way. And as a founder, you probably want to have a good sense of that before you go heads first into the thing.
There's a very fine line between founders that appreciate that if you tell them and then do something about it, and those that the moment that they hear it, they have this natural almost drive towards yes, in fact, I am already liaising with certain stakeholders, and this is how I've been spending, my spare time. And that really is at least in our eyes, from an investment perspective, that is what makes a founder for us, as opposed to a founder for a traditional VC, if you like.
Totally. Well, you've talked a lot about product market fit. How do you know what product market fit is if you don't understand the market?
Yeah, absolutely right.
You might understand the product really well, but that doesn't mean there'll be a fit.
Yeah. You're an investor yourself as an angel?
I am. Yeah.
We have fun with 2-3 companies together.
Several. Yeah.
It's great that we are crossing paths in that way. Are you doing this just as a way to help founders or get exposed to ideas early, or are you ambitious about your personal management of wealth?
I mean, I would say that anybody who's angel investing in long-term bets is not doing it solely for the money. There's a lot of other ways to make a quick buck. But, I'm doing it because I want to be around people I can learn with. And I think founders are people who have vision, who have ambition, and want to see real change in the world. And I always say, I think in general, when you look at people's investment strategy, you kind of get a sense of what they believe about the future, right? Do they want to stay the same, or are they willing to, and want to make sure that the world looks different than it is today? And so I think for me, I want to learn with and from people who are on that journey. And it's a privilege to be a part of it, really,
There are different lenses of imagining what a better world looks like. And in this day and age, the conversation has become always quite hard. Like you're either on one side or the other, and there is no communication. I remember where, at university it was mighty fine to disagree, but it wouldn't be personal, right? So, and now we're kind of living in a world whereby maybe outside of entrepreneurship is still, founders are kind of objective in their decision, most founders. But outside of it, if you look at the way the academia moves and the different policies that they bring about and then retreat on, and you've got this constant social tools that are, or social narratives that kind of are living rent-free in your brain, and I don't think it's healthy after a while to be so involved. But how do you manage when there is like an unstable political climate and you don't want to take hard positions that may position yourself against regulators, for example, or things like that. But at the same time, you want to be true because culture is important. You want to attract people that are aligned with you.
Your values and things. I mean, look, I do think there are some red lines that everybody has, right? Around whether it's this is the type of thing I will work on and I'm comfortable with it, or this is the way it's being used. And it's important to know that for yourself. It's also important to know that for anybody you work with, whether it's an investor or a founder or otherwise, I think it's rare that values change. So you kind of, and it's not that you have to have perfect value alignment with everyone you work with, but you just need to know what they are walking in the door. I think it's quite important. When I interview people to work for my teams, I actually really spend time trying to assess their values. Because I think skills can be taught and values very hard. So that's an important thing to assess for fit. But when it comes to the political context, it is hard because of how polarized things are today. But I think to the degree we all can, approaching that with a lot of curiosity is probably long-term going to serve everybody well. So this person has a specific worldview. It was obviously formulated based on a number of lived experiences and other inputs. What were they? And how did they get here? And if I approach this conversation in this way, how is it going to, or not, yield the outcome I'm hoping to achieve?
Last note, on a personal note, you are American?
Yes.
Grew up between Texas and DC, is that fair?
New York, actually. New York, but I've spent a lot of time in Texas and DC as well.
Because I remember last time we met in Texas as well.
Yes.
But American, based in London for a while.
Almost 10 years.
10 years, right?
Yeah.
How do you see, we seem to be growing apart as continents.
Yes.
Do you think it's just, play fighting or?
No.
Or it's?
No, I mean, I think that we face very different types of cultural challenges. And I'm a person who, Safi Bakal's book about loonshots, he talks about how he's a physicist and he says structure creates culture. And I think the fundamental economic and social structures of Europe are very different from the US. I was talking to actually a good friend who's an investor the other day, and what he was saying is that Europe is very good for a big middle class with the way it constructs economic and social services. You have, public health care, public transit, people are generally taken care of at the federal government level. You want people to be ambitious and want to bring new ideas into the world, but you don't want them to have to come from a place of lack.
Yeah.
I do think that resilience can be born in many, many, many ways. And I have worked with enough amazing Europeans to know that just because you have great social services that I think in some ways are human rights does not mean that you won't be ambitious. Yeah. It's more of, I think, fixing the structures and systems that we have to encourage that. And I think there are enormous ways that government can structure differently to support entrepreneurship and innovation in Europe, but they have to want to.
Yeah. I feel that there is a set of Europeans or individuals who have experienced Europe who are a bit more reasonable in wanting to find a midway between the two cultures, right?
Yeah.
And so in an ideal world, we shouldn't be growing apart. And,
no, I mean, look, if I want to change my job here, I can do it without losing basic benefits, which is huge in terms of, what you want is more people leaving these big companies to create their own work. And I think the social structure is great for that. Yeah. Now, the economic structure is not in Europe, right? It's really hard to raise money, really hard to get an exit, all that kind of stuff. And so there's things you have to fix on both sides. Whereas in the US, I would say it's the other way around.
Yeah. It's we're hosting our residency in San Francisco next month. This is the third time that we have European founders that we have invested in that come with us to San Francisco for living in an Airbnb together for a week. I think this is a model that has been followed by other venture builders and the early stage VCs alike. And the outcome is just so different than if we were to just be nationalistic, trying to constantly promote the country over the venture and the interest of the founders, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot to be learned from different cultures. I think I would never have understood the European way and mindset. I'm still learning, to be honest, without moving here, right, and immersing myself. And then, I grew up in a Taiwanese household, and then outside of my, home was America. And so I think I have benefited from all of these mixes of cultures in the way I work. Yeah.
Would you move back to the US at some point, or you're now?
I mean, I would never say never, but right now I think I'm really loving the experience I'm having here.
Great. Dorothy, thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the community will really cherish hearing your angle, both online and then meeting you in person at our next events.
Let's make it happen.